One day, while taking a walk through the garden, Mr. Johnson realized something that took him by surprise. He had fallen in love with Maria. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a gradual realization that she has become an integral part of his life. Her presence brought him peace, her words gave him strength, and her smile filled his heart with joy. But he hesitated, unsure if Maria felt the same way. Once upon a time, in a small Boston town, there lived a man named Mr. Johnson, a successful but often distant businessman. His mother, Mrs. Johnson, had recently fallen ill, and the once vibrant woman was now bedridden, requiring constant care. Unable to balance his demanding work schedule and his mother's needs, Mr. Johnson decided to hire a caregiver to assist with his daily needs. Little did he know, this decision would change his life forever. The day the caregiver arrived, Mr. Johnson wasn't expecting much. He had gone through several caregivers before, none of whom seemed to last. However, when Maria stepped through the door, her presence immediately brought a sense of calm and warmth to the home. She was a young woman with a kind smile and gentle demeanor, radiating an air of compassion that immediately put Mrs. Johnson at ease. Maria was not only skilled in her duties, but she also had an incredible ability to listen. Mrs. Johnson, despite her illness, had many stories to tell. Maria would sit by her side for hours, listening intently as she recounted tales of her youth, her late husband, her dreams for her son. Maria's patience and genuine interest made Mrs. Johnson feel heard and valued, something she hasn't experienced in a long time. As the day turned into weeks, Maria's presence began to have a noticeable effect on Mrs. Johnson's condition. Her gentle massage and careful attention to her diet and medication brought about a visible improvement. More than that, Mrs. Johnson's spirits were lifted. She was no longer just a patient. She was a person again, filled with memories and emotions that Maria helped bring to the surface. Mr. Johnson, though initially indifferent, couldn't help but notice the changes in his mother. He observed how Maria would stay late into the night, ensuring that every aspect of Mrs. Johnson's care was attended to. Maria went beyond her duty, often bringing homemade remedy, reading to Mrs. Johnson, and even singing her to sleep. The level of dedication was something Mr. Johnson had never seen before, and it started to intrigue him. Mr. Johnson began to spend more time at home, curious about the woman who was caring for his mother with such devotion. In the evenings, after Mrs. Johnson had fallen asleep, he would find Maria in the kitchen, tidying up or preparing for the next day. They began to talk at first about Mrs. Johnson's condition, but soon their conversation drifted to other topics: their childhoods, their dreams, and the challenges they face in life. With each other conversation, Mr. Johnson's respect for Maria grew. He admired her strength, her patience, and her unwavering commitment to his mother's well-being. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, selfless, kind, and full of quiet wisdom that was far beyond her years. Maria, in turn, saw a side of Mr. Johnson that he rarely showed to others. Beneath his tame exterior was a man burdened by responsibility, struggling to balance his personal and professional life. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Mr. Johnson confided in Maria about the pressure he was facing at work. He had been trying to secure a major deal that would make or break his company, and the stress was taking its toll on him. Maria listened intently, offering not just sympathy but practical advice. She encouraged him to take a step back, to remember why he started his business in the first place, and to reconnect with his passion rather than the pressure. Inspired by Maria's words, Mr. Johnson began to make changes in his life. He delegated more responsibilities at work, started taking better care of himself, and most importantly, spent more time with his mother. He realized that he had been so consumed by his career that he had neglected the people he mattered most. Maria had not only brought his mother back to life, but she had also helped him rediscover what was truly important. Over time, an unspoken bond developed between Mr. Johnson and Maria. They find themselves looking forward to their evening conversation, sharing more of their thoughts and feelings with each passing day. There was a mutual respect and understanding that grew between them, born out of the care they both had for Mrs. Johnson and the support they provided each other. One day, while taking a walk through the garden, Mr. Johnson realized something that took him by surprise. He had fallen in love with Maria. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a gradual realization that she had become an integral part of his life. Her presence brought him peace. Her words gave him strength, and her smile filled his heart with joy. But he hesitated, unsure if Maria felt the same way. Mr. Johnson struggled with his feelings for weeks, unsure of how to approach Maria. Finally, one evening, after putting his mother to bed, he asked Maria to join him in the garden. Under the soft glow of the moonlight, he confessed his feelings, telling her how much she meant to him and her kindness and dedication and touched his heart in a way he never thought possible. Maria was taken aback by Mr. Johnson's confession. She had grown fond of him as well, but she had never expected him to feel the same way. After a moment of silence, she gently told him that she admired him too, not just for his success, but for the changes she had seen in him over the past few months. She appreciated his vulnerability and honest quality that she knew took great strength to show. While they both acknowledged their feelings for each other, Maria made it clear that her first priority was still Mrs. Johnson's care. Mr. Johnson respected her dedication, and they decided to take things slowly, allowing their relationship to develop naturally. Over time, they knew that their bond was special, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared experiences, and a deep understanding of each other's value. As Mrs. Johnson's health continued to improve, she couldn't help but notice the growing connection between her son and Maria. One day, she called them both to her side and, with a twinkle in her eyes, gave them her blessing. She had always hoped that her son would find someone who truly understood and cared for him, and she believed Maria was that person. With Mrs. Johnson's blessing, Mr. Johnson and Maria allowed their relationship to grow. They continued to care for Mrs. Johnson together, finding joy in the little moments they share as a family. Their love was not the fairy passion for youth, but a steady, comforting presence that brought them both peace and happiness. As their relationship deepened, Mr. Johnson and Maria faced challenges that tested their commitment to each other. There were moments of doubt, especially when Mr. Johnson's work demanded more of his time, or when Maria questioned her place in his world. But each time, they came together to support one another, knowing that their love was built on a strong foundation of trust and understanding. After a year of growing closure, Mr. Johnson knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Maria. On a quiet evening, in the same garden where he had first confessed his feelings, he proposed to her with tears of joy in her eyes. Maria accepted, knowing that they had both found something truly special in each other. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by close family and friends. Mrs. Johnson, now much healthier, beamed with pride as she watched her son marry the woman who had not only cared for her, but had also captured his heart. The ceremony was simple, but filled with love, symbolizing the journey they had all taken together.